Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 104. Thanks so much for joining me. Roy Bentley is our guest today, one of our Appalachian poets from the new issue of Rattle. He'll be joining us in about 15 minutes, but before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry, and I know you do, so please do click that like button and share and all that good stuff. Now, as always, we're going to start with a bit of Poet Respond Live, and we have a really interesting Sestina today as the featured poem by Jenna Lanzaro. And let's call up Jenna right now and see if we can get connected with her. Hey, Jenny, you are live on the Rattlecast. Thanks so much for joining me. I think I hear myself in the background, so make sure you turn off or hit mute on whatever you're watching the stream at.
Hi there. Sorry about that. Are we good now?
Yeah, we're good now. So thanks so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah. Where are you calling from, first of all? I think you said you were in New Jersey.
Yes, I'm calling in from Jersey City.
Yeah, great. And so let's talk a little bit about this poem. A really, really fascinating Sestina that you wrote here, Incredible Truths. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what inspired it?
Sure. I've been thinking a lot lately over the course of the pandemic about what to do with numbers. I think we've been sort of inundated with numbers and statistics, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. It's like we see graphs of exponential growth and we hear that cases are doubling per day, but to process that emotionally is so difficult and so different than sort of processing it logically. So recently, last week or the week before, when Jeff Bezos went up into space, all of those questions were sort of brought back to the forefront. Like, how do we get at the emotional heft of someone whose wealth increased, I think, by like 70% over the course of the pandemic, and is sort of using that to go on joyrides in space, while, you know, at the other end of the spectrum, we have people who, throughout the course of the pandemic, like, can't even house and feed themselves. And so the poem sort of came from this question of how do we access the emotional scope of numbers, facts, statistics, all that.
Yeah, the poem reminded me of, have you ever seen, I can't remember what they call it, but it's a way to conceptualize what a billionaire actually is. And it's imagining laying out dollar bills on a football field. Have you ever seen that before? It's like an old video from like 15 years ago, yeah. And so like if you laid out the income where every dollar represented a certain amount of money, or I think $1,000 of income or something like that, you know, at the very beginning of the football field, it would be like millimeters high, and then even by the 50-yard line, it'd be like 3 millimeters high for like the 50th percentile, and then like right at the edge of the goal line on the football field, it just shoots off into space because we just can't conceive of what $1 billion was. And that was something that was made, you know, in old school graphics like 20 years ago or so. And we were just talking about billionaires, and now these people are, almost trillionaires, like 100 billionaires, I guess. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's definitely difficult to process. Like, I think this poem came out of a place of, I don't really have an answer to the question of how do we emotionally conceive of something that's like almost impossible to conceive of.
Yeah, and the form is so interesting too, because what really makes it work, there's two things that are great about it. The Sestina form, which is sort of a hidden Sestina because you don't break out the stanzas like you normally would, which is interesting. And also the way that it turns personal at the end too. Like it becomes, it goes from sort of a broad concept into something very intimate. Do you want to talk about how the poem came to be? Like, why did you choose the Sestina form?
Sure. Honestly, a lot of it came from a practical place of, I've been kind of creatively stopped up lately, and forms like the Sestina just kind of are ways that I can generate writing. But I think especially because the Sestina repeats itself so much, because you only have 6 end words to work with, I think it's really great for getting at puzzles. Like, questions that don't really have answers, because the repetition means that you keep looping around and coming at it from a different direction. And I think that's what I had to do with this question, and also why it became personal, because I sort of thought I was writing politically, and then it ended up being as much about sort of personal loss as it was about these bigger questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's where it just sort of takes off and sings at that point. And as far as the Sestina form, we had a great comment just on our Facebook page from T.R. Paulson, who's a regular listener and our resident formalist in the audience who always talks about formal poetry. But she mentions that the breaks in the form work beautifully to enhance the speaker's search for truth and inability to find it, which is, I thought, exactly what it works. It's sort of pursuing something in a sonnet, or I mean, in a Sestina.
Yeah.
And then sort of, trying to find this like the pattern, and try to make sense of sort of the patterns that you see or something. It's the sort of feel of a Sestina. It works really well for this poem's topic.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, do you want to go ahead and read it?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay.
Incredible truths. Two folks at a table exchange incredible truths. The Mariana Trench is 36,000 feet deep, 1,000 feet more than the cruising altitude of a plane. When you are on a plane, there is a farther far than the surface of the earth. When you are on earth, there is a farther far than the sky. There is always a farther far, if you believe the universe is infinite but also expanding, a far that is and isn't a fixed place. The girl says all contradictions are true, while looking for proof in the sky. Her hair resembles something accustomed to deep seas, long and breathless in alien air. The boy says exponential growth, points to a plane. Today, Jeff Bezos left Earth. They say he'll be a trillionaire. He bites a plain croissant. The far of that from us. People don't get how far 1 billion is on a scale, a magnitude as swollen as the Earth. She is scared of exponential growth. Also, paper cuts, telling the truth, and that this meal will end. The girl sips deeply. The boy looks at the sky where the girl looked before. He is patient, but counting. He looks at the sky, not her, where the words as irrefutable as what they've put on the plain surface of the table at the cafe. Once, still, he was deep in her. The Mariana Trench, she says, is far enough that the truth of what is there is not a truth we know, us of the surface of the earth. But there is a truth, and the trench is earth, after all. And, she doesn't say this out loud, you have always been, for me, like a sky, a not place, a largeness like the gullet of a lanternfish. Truth, chanted, becomes a sound. She does not say out loud, I flew on a plane and you didn't know. I was far and you didn't know. I read a book about lakes in the deep, brine pools on the sea floor. I met deep and insignificant people. For them you are words. I went from one part of earth to another part of earth, so far from this table. I was in the sky and you didn't know. I looked in your direction from a plane. I thought that we were and that we are not.
Yeah, that's just a great poem. Thanks so much for sharing and reading that. Incredible Truth by Jenna Lanzaro. And let me ask you about one line before you go. That line, he bites a plain croissant. I don't know. We always talk on this show about certain lines that just stand out. And there's something about that line that's so simple and authentic and telling or something. Where did you see that detail? Is it something that you actually saw or did it just pop out? What was that about?
I think the form of the Sestina kind of took me there, because I started really removed in third person. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that plane, Plane, like an airplane, as an N-word, I could also use Plain, like I could also use variations of it. And it kind of led me to thinking about, I guess, zooming in, like a plain croissant and a plain table. So that line was actually kind of a key for me in moving the poem from sort of the outer exterior world to an interior world.
Yeah, it's just always really cool to watch the way poems work and the sort of magic happens that are in a poem. And I think that is an important turn there in that. But anyway, thanks so much for sharing this, Jenna. It's great to talk to you and share this great poem.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Bye. Yeah, so once again, that was Jenna Lanzaro. You can find more of Jenna's work at her website, which is jennalanzaro.com right here. Now let me put on screen. Jenna Lanzaro, like you see, JennaLanzaro, jennalanzaro.com. So we have one other poem, a bonus poem, and the poet is a popular poet for both Poets Respond and the Ekphrastic Challenge. Devin Balwitt includes poems. She submits poems pretty much every week, which is just wonderful because they're always good. And she submitted a poem this week which sort of stretched the boundaries for what a Poets Respond poem could be, because there's no real news article technically that goes with this. Now, the news that happened with this is a few years old, but there's a wonderful video op-ed in the New York Times this week about Jocelyn Bell, the astronomer who discovered pulsars, and her story about how, because she was a woman, she wasn't taken seriously, and her partners at the research, which she helped really set up as a postdoc, won the Nobel Prize for discovering pulsars, and she was left out. And so I really encourage everybody, when this link comes up, or just search for this video. It's about a 15-minute documentary video from the New York Times, which just does amazing work. When New York Times is on, there is no better newspaper in the world. And because it was in the newspaper this week, I think it counts as for Poets Respond. And just a great story to talk about and share, and a really wonderful reaction to it by Devin Balwitt. And let's take a look at this poem right now before we get to Roy Bentley. Here it is. This is Pulsar by Devin Balwitt. She couldn't join us today, but we will hear her read it right now.
Pulsar, for Jocelyn Bell, astronomer. Back then, we girls were taught homemaking, while the boys bent over Bunsen burners, cheering as chemicals burst into flame and catcalling any of us who entered the room. She, though, had always hungered after the vastness of space, willing to be a freak if she could work with the stars, even hauling cables and spooling through charts. When she found the anomaly, her boss told her it was nothing, but women are used to finding something in the nothing we are left. She found a second one and watched the Nobel go to her lab director. The visionary skipper differs from the crew, he said, explaining the oversight. But minus the nobody in the crow's nest, no shout would galvanize the ship. Only a girl trumpeted headline after headline. What was her bra size, her preference in men? Decade after decade, she persisted in doing what she loved. The wonder, she found, came in tipping her head back, not bowing it under a silken ribbon.
Yeah, just a wonderful poem there by Devin Balwitt. And let me read. This is Devin's note about the poem. In high school, I remember having to fight to be allowed to study drafting and aerodynamics rather than crookery, and what it was like to be the only girl in those classes. So Jocelyn Bell's story resonated. How lucky that she persisted for those who received scholarships from her $3 million much-belated award. It's important that girls have role models, she said. Indeed, hurrah to Fred Hoyle as well for championing her cause. And that is the poem. And I do really encourage everybody to check out the New York Times article. Maybe I'll click on it here just so you can sort of see. I won't play it, but this is it in the op-ed section of the New York Times. She changed astronomy forever. He won the Nobel Prize for it. In 1967, Jocelyn Bell Burnell made an astounding discovery, but as a young woman in science, her role was overlooked. So check this out. It's a video documentary by Ben Proudfoot and featuring Jocelyn Bell herself. So do check that out if you would. It's a great poem, and that'll be Tuesday's featured poem on Rattle.com. And now let's take a brief break, and we'll get to Roy Bentley, our main guest today. So I'm going to put up the splash screen, and oops, this is the right thing. And we'll see Roy Bentley in just a minute. And we're back. I have Roy Bentley on the line. Roy Bentley is an Appalachian-American poet and university creative writing professor. The lives of the poor in America are the primary focus of his work. He's been published in poetry journals as well as in 4 books of poetry and 10 chapbooks. He currently resides in Pataskala, Ohio. Roy Bentley's poems have appeared in Blackbird, Shenandoah, Rattle, The Southern Review, Prairie Schooner, as well as many other notable journals and magazines. He's the recipient of the Creative Writing Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts and fellowships from the Florida Division of Cultural Affairs and the Ohio Arts Council. Hillbilly Guilt, his most recent book, is the winner of the Willow Run Poetry Book Award. And here he is, Roy Bentley. Hello, Roy. How you doing today?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's just my pleasure. Let me... Normally I just say jump in with a poem right away, but I forgot to pull up your books that you sent because I don't have them next to me. I have them in email. So give me 1 second. Do you want to talk just a little bit about what Hillbilly Guilt is about before you read a poem from it?
Sure. I've been thinking about this, and I, thanks to the pandemic, had 2 books come out in the same year. One of which, the title poem, takes on my mother and father's divorce when I was a kid. And the other one leads in the same story in a different way. One of them talks about how before it happened, we lived in kind of beautiful plenty. They had Cadillacs and, they were, hillbilly rich in a way, like Elvis or something. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, they were both of them a mess. And luckily, got back together and lived their life out. Each one of these books, though, takes on a different theme. This one's about the mistakes we live with, make and live with, and make and live with. And the other one is a little bit more cheery in some sense about what we rescue while we're doing that. I thought I'd start with this Hillbilly Guilt one.
Yeah. What poem do you want to read first?
Hillbilly Guilt. It's
okay.
The title.
Okay. What page is it on?
It's on page 13 in your hymnal.
Okay. 13. Let me go down to it. Okay. Go ahead whenever you're ready. I got it now.
All right. Thanks. Hillbilly Guilt. I was staying with him in his trailer that June. Weekends he drank. Maybe he felt his life was wrecked, though I didn't know what wrecking your life was about. He and my mother were talking after having been divorced for a few years. This after he lost the Shell station to employee theft. He had a case of hillbilly guilt, but was working and lived in another town. And he was trying to convince my mother to leave Dayton, meaning sell a house which she'd kept by factory work. She hadn't said yes, so he was angry most of the time. There was a picnic where he was working, and he got smashed. I got him to leave, but he spun the tires on his T-Bird and drove like whatever god-awful thing happened next had nothing to do with being drunk and pissed off. Which was when I prayed that he would crash the car, that whichever God heard the prayers of scared kids would keep us from getting there and her seeing him like that. Meaning I was praying for them to remarry. I had on a seatbelt, though they weren't common, and he said later, he remembered reaching over at 100 miles per hour in a downpour and cinching it tight, lying that he knew we were about to leave the road. He didn't. And his waxed gorgeous 63 T-Bird was the wreck we climbed out of, walking to where I waved someone down who took us to a hospital. I recall he broke his nose, that it bled and bled, and that he wanted me to believe what he said had happened that way. He seemed to want not to feel what he felt at having risked our lives for nothing. Oh, and I have to tell you, the Chevy to a hospital that stopped had a Virgin Mary on its curving blue dashboard, and that plastic figure said what it said about having a little faith.
Yeah, excellent. That was the title poem, Hillbilly Guilt, to Roy Bentley's newest book, which he has on the screen right there. So Roy, one of the things I read about you is that you were inspired to start writing poetry by Easy Rider. Do you want to explain a little bit about that, how that happened?
Well, I was 15 and it came out, and it was like I mean, you had to be some kind of crazy anyway to care about going to the movies and seeing those two fools on motorcycles. But it kind of swept us up. And they really did win our hearts. And a lot of us felt like, oh, that'd be cool. That'd be so cool to, to be like that. And then some of us bought the what do you call it, screenplay, read it, and found out that it was really about blowing it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't about going out there and grooving on motorcycles. It was about the big score. And anyway, it influenced me to try and say something or find something to say about this crazy America that in 1969, 1970 it was pretty scary. I mean, it was Nixon president, and it was scary. I was on my way to the draft. I was 15, 16. I was headed for the draft if Vietnam kept up, and it looked like it would. It was just a scary time, and they offered us something like, think of a different way, I think,
Mm-hmm.
like that, And so I started writing poetry, and it was shit, and it was shit for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wrote terrible stuff. I burned 350 poems once in a stump because they were so bad. This philosophy professor said, "Do you know how you'll be a better writer?" And I said, "No." He goes, "Burn everything you've ever written." So I did.
So why was it poetry? I mean, I understand, not wanting to go along with, the way that society was going and being inspired by the film that way. But what was it about poetry itself that
I think rock and roll.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't sing. I couldn't play guitar. And so I tried to figure out, is there, a third path? And Leonard Cohen kind of got me into, why not try poetry?
Mm-hmm.
And Dylan and a lot of the songwriters shaped my talent and whatever little I had, until I could go to school and get somebody to tell me not to do it that way, and try it a little different, and and then come back into your own style,
Mm-hmm.
So long ago, it's hard to even talk about it. I mean,
yeah, and your style. I mean, you write about real people and that sort of hidden America or something. The kind of America that's not in Hollywood,
exactly.
and not on the TV every day. Basically, I mean in Appalachia where you grew up. And all those kind of characters. I mean, it's really a sort of a character-driven, almost like it feels like you approach poetry in a similar way that a novelist approaches fiction, where you sort of find characters and then tell their stories. How do you go about doing that? Do you know a lot of people? Do you go places and hear things and write about people you know? Or does it make it up based on what? What is the source of all these characters that you come up with?
I could lie and say I leave the house, but I never do. Since this damn pandemic, I don't know. I spend a lot of time in the house. I guess I've always been a solitary. What I do is there's 4 or 5 story threads in my life: the divorce of my parents, the what, like we were talking about, the politics I grew up under, that whole rebellion theme that everybody in my generation seemed like they got caught on. It was like a carousel, really. Either you were a rebel or you were straight, a jock, or, you were whatever you were, but you had to fit into your little spot. If you were a hippie, a freak, you better have long hair and you better have, a certain kind of dress. And so that sort of thing, those kind of stories and wrestling with that became the threads in my books of poems. But I'm with you. They read like novels, I guess.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, they're character driven. I mean, you feel like you get to know these people as you're reading your poems, which has been the case of all the poems that we've published through yours too. It's a very distinctive style. Do you want to read another poem?
Yeah, I was thinking I might try that one that you published, The Death of the Box Turtle, about my cousin beating the hell out of a box turtle with a piece off the swing set. I love that poem.
Yeah, it's a good one. What page is that one on?
That one, I've got it printed off here. I think it's in the back of Hillbilly Guilt. Let me see what page.
Okay, let me.
93.
93. Okay.
Yeah. All right. The Death of the Box Turtle. I'm pretty sure that when she was dying, and sang Amazing Grace to him, she wasn't recalling running after him down the long hill of Comanche Drive, spitting up burst bubbles of blood from some dark place deep inside her. He was her grandson. Old Devil, she called him. The before and after photograph of a kid falling from the top of the playground slide or executing a dive off a refrigerator top, educating the knees of the umpteenth pair of Levi blue jeans with kneeling in tar and brake fluid blotted from the carport floor. Once, as a sort of joke, he tied her apron strings to the slats of her rocker as she dozed before Search for Tomorrow. When Bobby, that was his name, was 8 or 9, he would go out and come in and go out, slamming doors until there was no escaping him. And he announced his boredom one afternoon by jimmying a steel crossbar from a swing set at the edge of the orchard behind our house and bludgeoning a turtle to death with it. Where the steel had gone in, a shell fracture revealed bloody interior curves. Bobby and I recalled the death of the box turtle years later, after the other wreckage of childhood had retracted. We were driving back from my having read poetry for a good fee at a university in the Midwest. I was buzzing, full of Merlot and poached salmon. Nothing could have been further from my mind than his handiwork come back in the phrase, "Granny always liked you best." We were men. Such things should have been put away long ago, left to drift like the odor of rotting windfall apples in orchards at the end of autumn. They hadn't been. I want to say the turtle expired easily, bled out, the beneficiary of some unexpected grace loosed like manna from the sky over Kettering, Ohio. Truth is, its going took forever. Someone else had filled in the turtle's wound with clods of earth. Some plump child, perhaps, trying to reconstruct something in his or her image, maybe some future veterinarian. I want to say Bobby healed and all that pain fell away, sloughed like shell a reptile head telescopes in and out of, to touch, hear, see bright nothing, if nothing else. But healing is part forgetting, a search for tomorrows. He didn't heal. He might have, had the song gone on and Granny Potter, weak of heart, diabetic, come back from the country of memory, some holler, up from the deathbed of her terribly important one life, which, come to think of it, was what she did, choosing Bobby to sing to before she died, her piercing a cappella dirge of Amazing Grace, sounding in a hospital room by a creek where turtles drank, had forever, and trudged off small, liminal, pitifully slow in the light.
That was The Death of the Box Turtle from both Rattle number 72, the summer issue, and Hillbilly Guilt, Roy Bentley's newest book, which you see on the screen there. So what do you think, what is your purpose? Like when you set out to write a poem, what do you think the poem's job is to do? Do you? I read you said at one point that you were a poet, more of a mechanic than an engineer when it comes to poetry, which I really love the way you put that. But I'm wondering, like, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, what do you want the reader to get from your poems?
I'm of many minds about that. I've used poetry to meet people and build bridges, relationships. I mean, I think that was one of the reasons we started. People were trying to get, for want of a better word, laid. They wanted to connect with the opposite sex, and they liked poems. Women liked poems in 69, 70, 71. It was clear that if you couldn't sing and play guitar and you couldn't grow your hair out, you better have something. And for me, it was poetry, and it was terrible, but they were forgiving, and I seemed like I learned, and it was just like it was meant to be or something, even though I was bad for so long. I give OU a lot of credit for straightening me out. I had a really good bunch of teachers, one of whom was not a poet. Walter Tevis has a lot to do with how I write, and he was a good teacher, but he was a fiction writer. He never gave me above a B plus. But I loved the guy, and he was great as a teacher to me. And that's all I deserved, I believe. Having taught for many years, Walter was one of the most straightforward, people. Anyway, the way he wrote influenced the way I wrote. It just took me a while to figure out that's what was happening. I was watching him, closely to see what kind of prose worked in the world, the hustler, and I think prose did have a lot to do with how I write.
Mm-hmm.
He was a failed poet. I feel like I'm sometimes a failed novelist. When I was in his class and I would show him a short story, he'd go, "This is really, really bad." I'd go, "Really? Who says you know anything?" And so he'd go, "I know a few things." And try to listen to me, he said, even if you can't right now, just hear what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught me about verb tense and point of view and things like that, which he claimed you couldn't teach anybody. He taught me. And, I guess finally the story becomes as much to me as the language. And I bet some people would fault me for that as a poet, but the compression in poetry is different than the compression in, say, fiction, for me at least. And so I always love how tight you can get a poem if you work hard and stay with it a while, to where it blows up.
Yeah, your style is interesting. Like if you look at the Death of the Box Turtle, which we just read, it feels like you're sort of both trying to distract from the fact that you're reading a poem while also telling the story in like as tight and as like poetic a way as possible. So it's a sort of weird combination. Like your line breaks are very sort of almost as if they're random. Like you don't really have a lot of emphasis on the line to distract from the fact that you're hearing a story, which I think seems an important part of your style.
Yeah, if I have a style poem to poem, I think that's it. I think it's trying to find a way to sort of say, we're not really in a poem. And the reason you do that, or at least I do, is because I think people will get a little bit too academic for the good of the story. I may need to crack into an Appalachian, Rowie, or something like that. And it's not going to be, I won't be able to access it if I'm worried all the time about, structure and and audience even.
Yeah.
Take a risk, say, fuck it, I'm going to tell a hillbilly story,
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you don't want the structure to get in the way. And in a way that's sort of maybe a better way to introduce poetry to newer readers of poetry, where it doesn't feel so fancy. It's more about the storytelling. Lee Martin here says that Roy is a storyteller with a poet's attention to language and image and music, which I think is the perfect way to put it. So thanks for that, Lee. If anybody has any questions, I am following on YouTube and Twitter, so please do leave them there. Or not YouTube and Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. I always get these confused. YouTube and Facebook, and leave your questions there, and I will pass them along for Roy. But let's hear another poem, Roy.
Sure. This happens to be the first poem I ever wrote that I went, man, I think that I actually might work. So this is from like 1983 or 4. It's called On the Diamond Behind Garfield Elementary. Melvin White proves there is but one Boog Powell. It's from this book, this big sucker. This is my new and selected, which came out about a year ago and got swallowed by the pandemic. Anyway, it's in here at some point, but I've got it printed off.
Yeah, I'm more prepared now. I can find the poems. I have all 3 books up now. While you were talking, I just completely forgot that I didn't have the books in the stack.
Yeah, it's my fault.
No, it's mine. I went out of town and I haven't been to the office. I'm sure they're sitting there at the office waiting for me, but I haven't been down. I didn't get a chance. But anyway, I have this poem ready. On the Diamond Behind Garfield Elementary. Whenever you're ready with that.
Okay. When Dave Wheeler fielded the hard-won Hopper to short, He fired the ball to Melvin White, forgetting the huge first baseman moved like molasses. Melvin caught it on his sternum. You could hear the breath escaping all the way to center field. Falling in love is like that, begging air as the infield laughs hysterically. You could be dying, blue and big as Melvin White. It could be spring and the woman married. She could be dark and fine as air the hour after rain. Still they would double over laughing, the pain getting worse. And after she had gone, you would catch her scent. Imagine strong, small hands having apricots as you fall face first, runner advancing. Of course, eventually the pain would ease. You would stand. It would be important that the game go on. You would recall a score, how far behind you were when it hit. Only this bright burning in the lungs.
Yeah, and that was on the diamond behind Garfield Elementary. Melvin White proves there is but one Boog Powell. From My Mother's Red. What is it? My Mother's Red.
Yeah, My Mother's Red Ford.
My Mother's Red Ford.
From Lost Horse.
Yeah.
Out in Idaho.
So, what was it like putting out so many books during the pandemic? I mean, it must be rough.
Oh, it sucked.
Yeah.
It sucked.
Were you able to do? Yeah. Were you able to do anything to promote them? I mean, it's such a tough time for everybody, but for poets too.
Well, unfortunately, the pandemic also caused me to want to stay in the house and not travel much. And so I'm lucky there is a thing like this, like Zoom, so that I can get the word out a little bit. And people maybe, hunt with me. Friends seem to keep track of what you're doing, if you get one out there. And they know it's not my fault that they come out, the way they do. I mean, I was lucky this one happened to win a prize, while this other one was supposed to be in galleys with Main Street Rags. So I can't be responsible.
Yeah, well, it makes you seem very prolific that you've got 3 books
it does.
out.
It looks like that's all I do, and I think I do a lot more than that. I smoke pot.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, do you write every day? How much do you write? And what is your process like?
I write every day. I pull up the chair about 10 o'clock at night, work till 2, catch some sleep, get up in the morning, and if I'm feeling a need to justify my existence, I'll do another 4 hours. I've always felt like somewhere around 6 hours a day, if you can stand it, and take weekends off, and then throw some shit away. Because a lot of the shit you write is really is just shit. As you know, I've sent you some things that, I was embarrassed later when I got it back. I went, God, I sent him that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't take it too personally, but
I know, but
but it's interesting. You said poetry justifying your existence, which is kind of what it does. In a way, it's almost like a statement to the universe that I'm here. And I'm alive, and I've witnessed these things and have these thoughts. Where do you think you would be without poetry? I mean, what would you be doing if you weren't a poet?
I'd be dead. I mean, I would have to have some kind of art, and I couldn't draw, paint, sculpt. I couldn't use my hands for anything other than mitts. I mean, my typing was even disgusting. I was a typist in a service, and they were just knocked out by how bad I was, I cheated my way through school.
Well,
typing school.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem. What do you want to read next?
This one keeps cropping up for me, and it says, "You must deal with me." And I had a copy over here. This is Buzz Aldrin on the Moon, and when I wrote this poem, I was trying to come to grips with some of those American icons that you go, what does that mean? Well, anyway, this is called Buzz Aldrin, American astronaut, stands next to the stars and stripes on the moon. And it is in this big My Mother's Red Ford. It should be in the new poems section.
Okay, I got it.
All right. It's like third, fourth poem, I think. Neil Armstrong of Wapakoneta, Ohio, is out of the shot. This is Buzz and Old Glory. They'd killed our favorite Irish Catholic president, JFK, taught him about riding around in open Lincoln limos in Stetson-hatted Texas. Cronkite is doing a voiceover. Same voice as that day in Dallas when a whole world held its breath, then wept. By hopping around, Aldrin is affirming America's right to swaddle the globe in the rhetoric of manifest destiny. Nixon phones Apollo 11 live and in prime time, so Buzz stops moving, though it's his show and remarkable terrain. Supposedly, he is trying not to upstage the presidential call, not to say what any Presbyterian elder might, having given himself Holy Communion from a secret kit he stowed away. This moonscape could be the slow-changing light of Kiev, a bullying Russian winter, a harvest of unhappiness, hunger. Over Aldrin's shoulder, it's a desperate planet. Golda Meir is down there asserting the rights of the state of Israel over Palestinians, consenting to sanctioned killings which, when taken together, make a nation. Go ahead, Buzz. Bust some goofy dance move like it's the first sock hop on the moon.
And that was Buzz Aldrin, American astronaut stands next to the stars and stripes on the moon. And that is from My Mother's Red Ford. The new and selected poems by Roy Bentley that just came out recently. 6 hours a day is really impressive for writing. I mean, I don't know if any, I haven't talked to, I don't think, any poets in these first 104 episodes that are that dedicated, maybe. So it makes sense that you come out with poetry at the
but I can't do anything else.
Well, you teach too, right? You're a professor?
I used to. Yeah, I've got a little bit older in the last 3 years. Well, actually 5. I haven't taught in 5 years. Mm-hmm. And God bless teaching, but I didn't miss it. It was getting to be where it was a divided country, and the whole watching Fox News thing, your students would call you on things once in a while, and you'd have to go, let's don't talk about that or whatever. Down in Florida, Obama was getting elected, and we had some issues, and it's strange. You get caught right in the middle of it, as a teacher.
Yeah.
You want to tell the truth as you see it, and that may not be what people want to hear,
Yeah. That's interesting. So you had like Fox News viewers as students who had this kind of...
Big part of Florida seemed to me, young people seemed like their parents either watched Fox News or they drifted into it, but I'd get a lot of people talking, and you could tell it was talking points from Fox News, though I rarely watch it.
Yeah, that's interesting because poets, it seems, are very liberal oriented, and you see very few conservative poems. And so, did any of those students end up becoming poets? Or
no, when I taught creative writing down there, it was like, I don't know, it's like they were playing a little bit, and God bless that. I mean, maybe they play their way to caring, or they're just better readers, Not everybody winds up a writer. My mother even said once she hated that I had become a writer because she watched it and she said, "You're clearly tortured." I said, "Does it look that bad?" And she goes, "Well, that's all you think about. That's all you talk about. Why don't you mellow out? Why don't you run or something? She's right.
Yeah. So how do you feel like teaching to students? Like what advice did you have for them? And what, I mean, I don't know.
Depending on where I was teaching. If I was teaching at Denison, where I had a certain sway over the students, where you could say, I want you to do this. I want you to read these 800 pages by tomorrow, and they would. Or if I was teaching at a technical college where everybody was like me, they'd go, hell with you. I may or may not read 800 pages by tomorrow. It depended on where you taught. It really did. Mm-hmm. And I was okay with it being all kinds of different levels, of adults. It's just fascinating. I taught in a prison for a while, and medium security, though.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. I never heard so many excuses in my life, for what how things went wrong.
Yeah, we get submissions from prison too, and that's the general gist of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. This poem we have of yours in the current issue. It's an Appalachian Poets issue. Do you want to just talk a little
Yes.
bit about that? Because I think it's one of my favorite issues we've done.
Yeah.
Because Appalachian poets are such great storytellers, and they always have something to say that you don't hear every day. Even that last, the poem about baseball, you don't get that many poems about baseball. Actually, you don't get poems about these kind of characters that you write about.
Right.
Do you want to talk about just your influence being from Appalachia and what that means to you?
A lot of my influences are not the ones you'd think. There's a standard Appalachian canon that I'm aware of, but that I would have to say a lot of the stuff that I write, I'm simply hearing my parents and my people, talk. Granny, telling me all about, hellfire and scaring the hell out of me as a kid. I really wish I could have a conversation with her now and say, are you really sure about that hell place? I mean, what's a zip code on that?
Yeah.
I'd have to taunt her a little. She was funny though. She let me watch stuff on flying saucers. And I want to read you this one. There is a case for interplanetary saucers.
Okay. Which book is that in?
This is out of
The
Hillbilly
new one.
Guilt.
Okay. I
Yeah.
gotta find it really quick.
It's on page 44.
Okay.
There is a case for interplanetary saucers. Life magazine, April 7, 1952. That's what it says in the upper right-hand corner of a 20-cent copy of Life magazine, the one with Marilyn on the cover. A white lettered caption reading, "The Talk of Hollywood." 60 years later, I failed to see the relationship between Marilyn Monroe and interplanetary saucers. I do see that she smolders like an exploding H-bomb in a strapless evening gown. If what we mean by alien is not of this planet, that's her. And I see that a free market promise of sex with strangers is why America's the best country in the world in 1952. Albert Einstein has refused the presidency of Israel. Ban roll-on deodorant is introduced. MCML11, a leap year. It's a year of flying saucers and sex, cars and cigarettes. Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea has come out, and Steinbeck's East of Eden. We can and do read. But if the world looks to America, America is looking at the skies or the silver screen. We're Gary Cooper in High Noon in 1952. Harry Truman is in charge. Give 'em hell, Harry. We're a nation of lusty men who mentally undress wet dream worthy starlets, women with unrealistic expectations of themselves. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz are telling us smart young Americans are changing to Philip Morris. Why don't you? Some of us are Cold War McCarthyites, piloting starships named Buick and Plymouth and Ford, hitting the gas and heading for three-bedroom homes with backyard clotheslines, and no need to question being American. Dwight Eisenhower hasn't been elected, but he will be. Mother Teresa's about to open the home for dying and destitute in Calcutta, and war rages in Korea. Planet Earth is one heartless place in 1952. Aliens may want to watch it. They might want to keep going, explore someplace else.
And that was there is a case for interplanetary saucers, a timely poem because there's all that saucer news or the
Yeah.
objects. What do you think? Do you think there are?
Oh yeah, they're here.
They're here, yeah.
They're here.
How long do you think they've been here? Do you believe the What do you
Since
think about?
1954.
You think? Do you think it was the nuclear bomb that they brought them to check it out? That's the one theory I keep hearing.
If everybody would just go, he has no idea. Whatever he says, it's just what he thinks.
Uh-huh.
That's what I want.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I one time when I was a little kid in Dayton, I was about 6 or 7, and something beside my bed looked like one of those ET things. Years later, I saw the shape and went, that's what was beside my bed. But I don't trust my own memory.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I ever had any, contact with with aliens. I think I was a little goofy as
Uh-huh.
a kid, you know.
Yeah, well, I can relate to that. I actually, I have insomnia problems, and like I sleep really
Yeah,
light. Like I have really low melatonin levels, and so I sleepwalk. I'm always jumping out of bed thinking there's like a snake under my boot or whatever. And
yikes.
when I was a kid, like a teenager, I used to sleepwalk, like seriously sleepwalk. Like around like maybe age 14, and sometimes my dad would wake me up outside. Like I'd be like wandering around outside. And when I watched like on, it was one the time when the History Channel started doing all the UFOs and alien abduction stuff. And at one point I was like, oh my God, I'm being abducted by aliens at night. And I really, and for a little while I was like I got goosebumps. I was like, oh my God, is that what's going on? I keep waking up
Oh,
outside.
shit.
And,
God.
but then eventually I realized that I just sleepwalk. And I wonder how much that those stories are that, but,
Yeah, that's great. No, I'm pretty sure I was a little stressed by, their divorce and,
mhm. Yeah, I mean, it
they,
was the same. My parents were going through divorce at the same time too, so that was probably
yeah,
a lot to do. And that the whole teenage stress too, and
sure,
puberty and all those things were just
hair
exactly, yeah.
down there.
So this
Yeah,
poem and others we already seen, you have a lot
yeah,
of pop references in your books.
yeah,
You really situated in the time and place that you do. A lot of musical references too.
yeah.
Is there a reason that you do that?
Sometimes I feel like you're privileged to get to mention some of these things and these people because, you grow up with them like Muhammad Ali or, you know, uh, some of the boxers that I've always admired and other people like, well, son of a bitches, you get to say something awful about, and I like that. Nixon, I like that I get to say stuff about him over and over because he was scary. He was real scary,
Hmm.
and people act like Trump was like him or whatever. I go, yeah, yeah, that's what he was like.
Yeah, yeah.
He was a whack job,
Yeah, I think they both
and you,
have narcissistic personality disorder. Is my
yeah,
armchair diagnosis of both of them.
yeah. Why do you want to be the king of the world if you don't like the world?
Yeah, yeah.
And if you love it, sure, hell. But anyway, I in this book I noticed that a lot of the mistakes we make become the important part of the heart of a bunch of these poems, and I'm uh, I'm amazed that I'm okay with making mistakes. Really, that I found it to be like something we have to do,
Hmm.
and so almost don't apologize for it. Some of the stories I tell, I look bad.
Yeah, yeah.
I look terrible in a couple. I mean, I go, wow, you should maybe not shouldn't write that. Now your mom.
Do you ever choose not to publish something that you wrote because of that, or for any
Yeah,
reason, or yeah?
yeah. I took back about 4 or 5 over me and Dad. We had a bad run of it, and I didn't think he deserved it. If there should be anybody reading it in 5 years, I don't
Hmm.
think he deserves, to be pilloried because I was an idiot or a semi-idiot even.
Hmm.
Now this one, I want to try to maybe end with this. Am I at the ending?
Oh no, we got like 15, 20 minutes left.
Oh, good, good,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
But this poem, this is the first one that Jessica Faust at the Southern Review took. That, like you, when somebody like that takes a poem, I go ape shit, crazy, happy. And this one was one of those, except she made 46 changes on this poem.
Oh wow.
And I said, "Are you sure you still want it?" She was right on every one of them. It's amazing. And I learned an enormous amount. Anyway, this poem's called Sunday Afternoon at the Midland Theater in Newark, Ohio.
And which book's it in?
That's in, it's in the New and Selected,
Okay.
and it should be under the Walking with Eve in the Loved City part.
Okay, let me find it.
Yeah, I should have had that marked, but I ran it off.
Yeah, this one I'm not seeing. It's in
But
my mother's red Ford.
yeah,
And it's what's it called again?
here it is, page 111.
111. Okay.
Cool.
Oops, except your numbers are different than mine. Let me see. One. Okay, I got it right.
Got it?
The force of the right words?
No.
What's it called again?
It's called Saturday Afternoon at the Midland Theater in Newark, Ohio.
Oh, I was typing in Sunday. Okay,
Ah.
let me try again.
All right.
Okay.
No 111? Oh, you've got a manuscript.
Yeah, I've got a manuscript, so the page numbers
It's
are different
different.
too. Let me see.
It should be close to Fitzgerald and Zelda. February
I got
19.
it here now, finally. Yeah, it was because I typed in Sunday. I'm just
Right.
cool.
Cool.
Okay, go ahead.
Slouched in a theater seat and watching Bullet for the third time, a look I get from an usher might best be described as granting a general amnesty and full pardon for my having shelled out only the one admission price. There's the balcony with its blue and red curved seat backs. By a door to the upstairs men's room, a framed likeness of the Civil War drummer boy, Johnny Clem, whose baby-faced looks and sudden dark hair remind me of a young Italian, then Salminio in Rebel Without a Cause. There's that angels in the architecture grand gesture of a ceiling, the wall of drapes of eloquently pleated purple, and there's the screen framed in its filigree of gold and silver. The usher is accommodating me by simply not noticing. I'm on my third popcorn, third enormous Coca-Cola, second box of Milk Duds when I realize I'm happy, elated. In Ohio at 14, you're disappointed most of the time, so I want to tell Frank Bullitt just how it feels to be from Dayton and new here, a fat kid 8th grader at Fulton Middle School. But then Steve McQueen is French kissing Jacqueline Bisset good morning, strapping on a shoulder holster and .38 pistol. Now he's stopped at the corner of Clay and Taylor, searching the pockets of his trench coat, suit coat for change. I've loved that look all afternoon. The usher reacts as if that says it, that fuck the world expression of Frank Bullitt as he gives up and bangs the cover and steals a newspaper. Turns out 1968 isn't for the faint of heart. You need a Mustang GT 390, ice water for a blood type, a tolerance for the visages of the dead you made dead, slaughtering out of that old American purity of motive that dissolves into a communion of terrific car chases wherein thunderous algorithms of horsepower rule.
Yeah. Oh, that's Saturday afternoon at the Midland Theater in Newark, Ohio, for my mother's red Ford. Just another of those poems that just roll out with the images and just so much detail. Like you're sort of like overwhelmed in this space of detail in your poems where you're just transported back into the memories that you're writing from. It reminds me too of, who was it that said, if you lived into adulthood, you have enough content to be a writer for the rest of your life.
That's right.
It's hard to remember, like think about my own childhood as having as many stories as you seem to come up with. How much, I don't know, what is the role of poetry in memory, and how accurate do you try to make it? Do you remember these things as you're writing them, and like more details kind of come out of the depths of your mind? How does it come back to you?
People help. I mean, Jessica Faust actually corrected this poem. It wasn't Milk Duds the first time; it was something else.
Mm-hmm.
And she suggested Milk Duds, and she said the reason was it was available at the time, and blah blah blah. So sometimes you'll mess it up by the candies that I picked then were not available then.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So your memory is creatively compressing other times you went to the movies. So if somebody helps you and fixes it, far out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't, I mean, what the hell? I mean, I just want to say that I only think I'm one of many who are trying to do it, and that my way of doing it is, I wouldn't recommend it for anybody else. I swear to God. I hear Walter saying, I sure as hell can't teach you how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think my way of doing it, I need help. I mean, she came at that poem, like I said, with 46 changes.
Mm-hmm.
think about it. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? You
yeah,
wouldn't do that. You
yeah,
would say, forget about it.
yeah.
It was beautiful.
I
It
don't know.
was.
I think you have a line I saw somewhere where you said, "I try not to dilute reality," which is another
Yeah,
good way
yeah,
of putting what you do. I mean, it's so
yeah.
not diluted. It's so all there in your poems. I don't know if maximalist is a phrase I've heard used before,
I
um,
like that.
but you do include so much detail that you're really sent to the place, and usually it's back to that '60s and '70s era,
Yeah,
and sort of like a chronicle of growing up at that time. Um,
yeah, yeah. The history part of my poems is, I would say it's accurate to a point.
mhm.
And then there will be places where you had to fudge it for a theme or something, or you just didn't want to tell that whole story on somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of your friends did something and you just want to take it out or
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, I think you should in a way. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Yeah, I always think of it as like there's a difference between truth and facts,
yes.
and that you don't have to be factually accurate as long as it's true to what you're writing about. And sometimes it's a better story if it's not factually accurate but more truthful in the way
Yeah,
that you tell it, right? So,
exactly.
it's the details that bring it alive. Um, I don't know.
Yeah, when you say that, when you
Hmm.
said it's details that bring it alive, it brings me to this story about my old man who's he's always didn't like my poems for some
Hmm.
reason. Like he
Yeah.
might come off badly in them.
Hmm.
And he does sometimes, but not as badly as he thinks or as, awfully as he thinks. Anyway, he said one time, "You never get the cars right." And he made me a list. This was like a week before he died, of all the cars and motorcycles he had ever owned.
Hmm.
And he wrote it out by hand.
Wow.
And it's in my wallet right now. It's laminated. And that way I can go through and go, oh, that was a 56 Eldorado. I got it.
Hmm.
He didn't want the model or the make, the number of the year or anything screwed up.
Yeah. Why do you think that was important to him?
I think he felt like if you're going to tell the truth and you're going to try to tell the truth, this is going to be my signal that you're trying.
Hmm. Oh,
And that
interesting.
way, if I said something icky, that they had done or I had heard them say or something, I'd show him a poem if I had negative information in it, and he'd say, I wish you wouldn't do that.
Hmm.
And then I'd say, but I got to tell that story, and we'd negotiate sometime.
Hmm.
And when he died, I decided I wouldn't write anything too awful, because I don't want him coming back and scaring the hell out of me.
You mentioned earlier that one of the poems that you published had a lot of edits too from the editor. Is
Yeah,
that something you come across much? Because I don't find myself editing very many people very often. I mean, sometimes they're like the beginning,
well, you're more than welcome
introduces
to
it
edit
too
me.
much, and the end
Yeah,
goes on too far. Those are two things that kind of happen
absolutely.
where the heart of the poem is still great, but there's just a little
Yeah,
too much preamble or a little too much telling in the conclusion. But
yeah,
otherwise, I don't find, because you just get so many submissions that
yeah,
once you have a poem to publish, I mean, I don't know. And I wonder if maybe it's me, my failing, and I should be more hands on with the poems. But I feel like once that
how
you rise up past everybody, like who am I to say is kind of
I
my
I hear you.
view
I hear you.
as an editor, which is not other people's view, and that's fine. But I don't
Yeah,
edit
yeah.
much. Do you
I hear you.
feel like do you like get feedback like that from editors and change very often, or is that rare?
I've been at this a long time. I've been publishing poems over 35 years.
Hmm.
That even sounds, harsh. I mean, just to say it out loud, someone's been publishing that long, and it's not dead, at the moment.
Hmm.
I think that I don't know why in the world you wouldn't expect somebody to correct you.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? To go, I challenge this line.
Yeah.
When I was 20, I wrote a poem and it had this line in it said, the body deserts us, but not today. Well, a 20-year-old saying that, 26, 27 years old, ought to be smacked in the back of the head. I'm 40 years older than that now, and I definitely know the body deserts us, but maybe not all of it today.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I don't know. I just expect to be corrected.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. There's some. I don't know. There's a few times that like certain lines are just off. But for the most
Yeah.
part, I mean, I don't know. Poets seem to know what they're doing. Um, do you do much revising yourself?
Oh
In
yeah.
that, yeah.
Those 6 hours are not working on new poems. Normally, they're poems like this one that we just heard revised for 6 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there are those kind of poems. And then someone giving you 46, corrections on top of that. I mean, and I'm grateful because that poem then, if I don't tell that story, the poem's just out there and, my name's on it and
Mm-hmm.
I'm good with that. Thank you for the editorship. And I mean, my God, that level of editing, you could do that. I'm guaranteeing you.
Mm-hmm.
The reason they don't do it, I'm sure, is the time factor.
Yeah.
I mean, she probably had a couple of hours in that poem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I feel like I don't know. Like when you're presented with a poem that works, it's kind of rare, and then it
Yeah,
works, and I don't want to mess with it. You know.
I hear you. I hear you.
Like maybe
Yeah,
it's just the volume. Like maybe if we had fewer poems submitted, I would want
yeah,
to like polish up the ones that were close more often than I do. But when they work, it feels like they work, and I feel like
I,
it's like I don't know. Something that I wanted to talk more about was
yeah,
that concept you had before of being an engineer or being a mechanic rather than an
yeah,
engineer. And what you mean by that? What does that mean to be a mechanic of poetry instead of an engineer?
yeah. I mean, to me, an engineer like a Merwin or somebody, I've heard them talk to where they can schematicize a poem. They know what that poem, what the points of interest are, and where you should come back to something you raised and come back to this other thing you raised. And I call it a schematic, but it means to me that they see the elements as they have to be linked. They have to, for this short space in time called a poem, they should be linked, and then they should pay off. Like if there's a gun in the first stanza, it better go off or something real important happen. Of course, those same rules apply in fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Just the compression seems to be so much tighter, in a poem. I can give you a specific example. That Ringo Starr poem that you published, the point at which in that poem we say, on the order of being hired as the, dumb luck, on the order of being hired as the Beatles drummer,
Mm-hmm.
to compare the luck of having a soul, if we do,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that it's like you'd be tapped to be the drummer for the Beatles and you'd pull it off, like Ringo did. I mean, um, there's something about that that only a mechanic, someone who is just in the poem rather than schematicizing it idea wise,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
discovers. That
Mm-hmm.
was a lucky, fortunate line.
Yeah.
And that's why I put dumb luck right before it, because the signal to me forever. Oh, remember when you got that line? It was dumb luck, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you're in, in the grease in the engine working on it
Yeah.
instead of diagramming the blueprints for how it's going to work. Yeah, yeah. I
And
see
nothing
that now.
against
Yeah.
that. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Nothing against that. I wish
Yeah,
I
for
could
sure.
read blueprints.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Merwin's great. It's interesting to think of him that way. I hadn't really put it, thought of it that way in my head, but that's a really interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
One last question, then we'll do one last poem. I think
Okay.
people always want to know, suggestions for poets to read. Who do you like to read? Like what poet sort of turned you on and made you, knocked your socks off that you just couldn't get enough of?
Lately, this one.
Uh huh.
This is Half Life by Jane Ann Fuller,
Yeah, that's great because
friend of
I've never
mine.
heard of Jane Ann Fuller.
Oh yeah, she's an Appalachian
Mm-hmm.
poet,
Uh huh.
and this I read that in one sitting. I was like knocked out by that. People like that, contemporaries, get me a lot more than old dead poets.
Mm-hmm.
Songwriters seem to get me more often than a lot of writers. But I read the New Yorker a lot. I read everything you send me. I read, I've got a thing here of ungodly amount of, literary reviews that I read over and over, and I find just delightful stuff in. I used to tell my students, though, get you one of those, subscribe to it, and put it on the back of your toilet.
Yeah.
It will fit on the toilet tank. You can go in there and you can read it,
Yeah, that's the thing about poetry is it's the perfect length.
Yes.
I was just on vacation visiting in-laws, and they have this on the back of their thing. They have some toilet trivia book or whatever. But I was actually just thinking about that because a poem is sort of the perfect length for reading on the toilet. I wonder. I mean, maybe no one wants to say that because it's not a fun way to think about poetry, but it is a great idea to put poetry on the back there.
I hear you.
So anyway, what poem do you want to finish off with, Roy?
That Ringo Starr poem, which is one of my luckiest moves in my life. Ringo Starr answers questions on Larry King Live about the death of George Harrison.
In which book is that in?
That's in this new and selected one. That's on page 116, 117.
Okay, I'll find
it. It's in the
I got it. Ringo's easy to find.
Cool. First, Larry King mistakenly calls Ringo George, then asks him whether his passing, George's, was expected. He answers that it was. Says they knew he was sick, had lung cancer. I'm watching, though it's none of my business how grief-stricken Ringo Starr was, and likely still is, or whether he was there at the bedside at the moment George left his life for some other, if you can believe what George believed, which was that we keep coming back till we get it right. And when Ringo is about to let down his guard and be a bit more self-disclosing, even honest, Larry interrupts, asking, do you ever want to pinch yourself? And Ringo Starr says, sure. In 1988, years before, in another interview with George, this years after Lennon's death, Ringo confessed that he was the poorest Beatle, then laughed and blew cigarette smoke upward, which must have seemed terribly funny to George, an inside joke because he said, hello, John, to the smoke like it was Lennon by virtue of his unacknowledged wealth or some spirit he used to conquer worlds with. Ringo says he was shocked upon hearing the news of the death of John Lennon, but that George's death was another thing entirely. He doesn't quote from the Bhagavad Gita, but it's as if he wants to say we continue on, are these spirits, a sort of outrageous bliss even to think it, dumb luck on the order of being hired as the Beatles' drummer. Maybe he would have said it with respect to George or ventured his own beliefs if Larry hadn't butted in to ask him which of the Beatles was the best musician. You mean now? And I want to laugh now because maybe Ringo's imagining how hard it is to move your hands after you're dead, or to move at all, and how impossible it must be to keep time and tempo in all that anonymous blankness. The dark become your most imploring fan.
Yeah, excellent poem. I just love that when Ringo Starr answers questions on Larry King Live about the death of George Harrison. And I remember after reading that poem and accepting it, I looked up and watched the actual interview, which is just as you described it. I mean, people should go look at that.
It's a gas.
It really is, but such a great metaphor for life or something, or how maybe we view ourselves or something. It's a great poem. And
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that and all the others too, and everything else, Roy.
Right
It's great talking to you and getting to know you better.
You too, man. I'm in it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Have a good night.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Thanks, folks.
Yeah, so that was Roy Bentley with a bunch of books. He's got My Mother's Red Ford, which is the new and selected book that he was reading mostly from. Then Hillbilly Guilt. He's also the author of American Loneliness, Body of a Deer by a Creek in Summer, Walking with Eve in the Loved City. These are great titles, too. So I'm just going to read them out. Starlight Taxi, The Trouble with a Short Horse in Montana, Any One Man, and Boy in a Boat. And Roy's one of those poets that I can't direct you to a website, so you're going to have to look up these books somewhere. But just type in Roy Bentley and Hillbilly Guilt, or Roy Bentley and Mother's Red Ford to find the new and selected. And you can get those from Amazon and all that. He publishes on a lot of different presses and doesn't have a lot of social media. So it's really great to finally meet and get to know Roy a little bit. And I'm really glad he could be here with us to do that. Now we're going to move on to the open lines. And the prompt for this week, let me find it really quick. The prompt was to write a nonce form, write your own form of poetry. So a nonce form is one you make up yourself. Make up your own nonce form and write a poem using it. Be sure to include a short explanation of the rules. That was the prompt for this week. But if you have anything else you'd like to share, you can share poems about that prompt. You can share poems about the news. You can share poems you've published recently and are proud of. We can highlight other magazines, whatever you would like to do in the next hour or so, which is the open lines. I'll put up the instructions on the screen right now, but all you have to do is email your poems right now to openmic@rattle.com. That's openmic@rattle.com. Then pick the way that you would like to call in. If you'd like to be on video, it's a Skype call to Rattle Poetry, all one word. Just put Rattle Poetry into the search bar on Skype and wave and say hi. I'll wave back and you will be on the call list. If you would rather do it by phone, the phone number is 818-850-7727. That's 818-850-7727. Just let it ring a few times, then hang up, and I will call you back. Anybody who calls right now, I assume, wants to share a poem, so I will just call you back when it's your turn. And that is what we're going to do. I'm going to put up some music and take a quick break and get these poems and things set up. So we'll see you in a little bit. And I'm back. Thanks so much for a little extra patience than normal. I was opening up my open mic at rattle.com account, and they asked me if I wanted to open in a new Chrome profile. And I thought, oh, what's that? Maybe I'll click on it while I'm live on a show. And apparently what that does is let you not actually access it. So I had to log out and then log back in. But we're good here. So we have a bunch of people lined up who would like to share poems. Let's see. Let's see. Well, first we'll start with the Megan's and my poem. Now, I did not write, well, I wrote like half of my own made up form, and I loved it, and I didn't want to like half-ass the rest of it. So I'm going to share it next week because I didn't have time. We've been on vacation all week, and I didn't really have time to to finish the poem, and I actually kind of like it. I like what I'm doing with it. So I'm going to debut that next week, and maybe we'll do 2 poems next week. I did on the plane on the way back from Oregon write some haiku about our vacation. So maybe I'll share those. We went up to Bend, Oregon, which I just love. You know, we love hiking and nature, and up in that area around the Newberry Crater and all that stuff. There's just so much great, both nature and geology. It's just so fun hiking through so many different landscapes with waterfalls and lava tubes and things. And we went hiking on one of my favorite little hikes is the Big Obsidian Flow, which is this like, I don't know, it's hundreds of feet high, just pile of black glass, volcanic obsidian that cooled rapidly into glass and then fractured up. And we hiked through there. We did some other stuff too. So here's some haiku about our vacation that I wrote. These are the ones I liked from the series I wrote on the plane. I just spent the whole plane writing haiku on the way back, which was fun. Everybody else was asleep. And here are some haiku from our little vacation. Let me get rid of Roy for a second. So here are my vacation haiku. Another year felt on the antler. Another year felt on the antler. That's a 1-line haiku for some deer that we came across. Baggage claim. A raccoon passes on the shoulder. Baggage claim. A raccoon passes on the shoulder. Every light at the tip of the airplane's wing. Every light at the tip of the airplane's wing. Of history, only the shards remain obsidian. Of history, only the shards remain obsidian. A bee drinking beer spilled in the dry grass, everything golden. A bee drinking beer spilled in the dry grass, everything golden. And the last one, Marco Polo until the sky plays too. Marco Polo until the sky plays too. And that was our vacation, you can imagine, our vacation in haiku. And this was Megan's, and Megan's actually did the thing. I had a bunch of stuff I had to do this morning. And then I had a softball game, which we lost 9-0. So that was disappointing. But I didn't have time when we got back, and we were too busy during the time. But Megan spent a good chunk of the day writing a haiku, or at least some of the day, a little bit of time today. And this was, not haiku, a nonce poem. And this is Megan's nonce form that she made up. Let me show you this. I call this form, this is Megan saying this, I call this form inditro, the Italian word for backwards. There's nothing Italian about it. I'm just trying to sound fancy. And so Megan's form here is 4-line stanzas. There's 4 of them with an A-B-A-B, C-D-C-D rhyme scheme. So the rhymes alternate like that with new rhymes in each stanza. And then it's syllabic with the first line with 1, 2, 3, 4 syllables. And then it goes down the other way. So at the end of the poem, it's 4 syllables, then 3, then 2, then 1. So this is Megan's form, which she is calling an inditro, for Italian for backwards. And here it is. This is Megan's poem, Morning Grief. Each pale dawn, now I reach for what is gone. Find the dust left behind, and in disgust rise from our bed, brew coffee. You're dead. Me, I pace this place, these still rooms, your face looms. There's Megan's inditro, Morning Grief. You can hear the syllabics and the rhymes there. Very interesting form. Now let's see what you have for us. We have Carla Schwartz, Zachary Honeycutt. We have a 646 number. We have Mike Bales. We have Nivedita Karthik. Let's see. Yes, Nivedita Karthik. We have Karen Warinsky. Melody Wang. We have Richard Westheimer. We have a 312, which I think is Ted Guevara's sister would like to read his poem form. So let's see. Let's start first with Let's start first with Nivedita. See if we get to her before her workday starts. We haven't had Nivi on in a little bit. Hey, Nivedita, how are you doing today?
Hey, Tim. I'm doing great, thank you. So not on video today, but I'm actually sitting at the airport waiting for my flight. So
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad you could join us anyway. How are
I was so
things?
happy.
Yeah. How are things going in India? I was kind of wondering, because when we would talk to you a lot a few like month or two ago, the pandemic was crazy there, and
It's actually getting much better now because I mean there are still places in which there is vaccine shortage, but then there are many people who have gotten the vaccine, so it's not spreading as fast all over the place. I mean there are a few isolated pockets here and there, but apart from that, it's mostly life's back to normal. Of course, schools and colleges are planning to start from this term, which probably is around July, August here. That's when summer holidays ends and the new year starts. So some
yeah.
schools and colleges are starting then. So it's slowly getting back to normal, and it's by no means as bad as it was probably around the beginning of this year or even Feb, March when I was telling you. So it's definitely much better now.
Yeah, so what I wanted to ask, like, what you think it is, because I see the numbers on like the world meter charts and stuff, and it peaked in early May, this new wave. But did anything change? Like what caused it? Because the population is so huge, and according to the numbers, it should be running through even more. So what was it that slowed down the spread? Do you think?
I think this time what happened was that since we've already gone through 2 waves, people were more aware of it. And second, so even now, like there are containment zones here in India, but what the state governments are doing is once they find out that sort of in an area you have about 20, 30 people affected, they sort of preemptively make it a containment zone so as to stop the spread. So I think that's what is helping more. They're not waiting for it to reach the numbers it needed to reach before in order to make it a containment zone. So they've sort of tightened the rules a bit. So it's like as soon as they find out that, okay, there's going to be a cluster here, they sort of close it down and things like that.
Yeah.
That's I think what's helping this time around.
Well, thanks so much for that insight.
In May when it spread, it wasn't all over the country. Like there were some places that were more affected, like these tier 1 cities where we have people traveling a lot, like Delhi, Chennai, Bombay, and things like that. But the other places weren't as affected, if that makes sense. Like they had cases, but not as much as this. So overall, this time it's more clusters of infection rather than widespread throughout the country. So I think that's what's helped bring the numbers down as fast as it did this time.
Okay, yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that insight, because we're in the United States. We're going through sort of the panic of it coming here. The new wave and so it's good to sort of hear what was working over there and how the curve was flattened once again, and how we'll get through this too maybe
It did,
over here.
yeah. As always, this too shall pass.
Yeah. So I have your Knots poem here. Do you want to do you want to start with that and explain what you did?
Sure. Okay, so basically, I wrote a really small poem. I call it quattro, which is Latin for 4. So there are 4 stanzas, and each stanza has 2 lines. So the first line has 1 word, and the second line has 3 words. In the second stanza, it's sort of the reverse, 3 words in 1 word. The third stanza is again like the first stanza, 1 word and 3 words. And the fourth stanza, you have 2 lines, each with 2 words. Sort of like Megan's, but not exactly. Like I didn't go for syllable counts, but I went for word counts. So that's my nonce poem, and I call the form quattro, which is Latin for 4.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's hear this one.
Okay, great. The worst thing about summer. Spring turns to summer. Pack your bags. Travel. Lazing by the pool. Hot chocolate season over.
Excellent. Thanks so much
if
for
you know
sharing
me,
that.
I really love hot chocolate, so that's hence the reason for this poem. It's not like I stopped drinking hot chocolate in summer, but it's just that the frequency gets reduced, so I'm like sad every time I need to take in less hot chocolate than before.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And let's hear, you had another one for us too, right?
It's, as usual, a funny news story about a group of cockatoos that have now learned to open garbage can lids and are now getting their own meals, basically.
Okay, let me see. Oh, that's a 30-second ad, so I can't play it. But we'll look at the pictures. Yeah, there's some pictures here. I'll put the pictures up.
Yeah, so it's basically the yellow-crested cockatoos. They sort of grab the lid with their beak and then shuffle back along the rim all the way to the end, and then toss the lid open, and they've basically found a way to get their own food.
Oh, wow.
And scientists are like So there was this group that actually first learned it from humans, and then the other cockatoos, seeing them do it, sort of learned. And now almost all cockatoos in Sydney, Australia, have learned how to open garbage can bins and get their own food.
Oh wow, that's actually fascinating from like a science, learning.
Scientific.
Yeah,
I know.
it really is that they could do that. Like, learning by watching someone else do it is impressive that it could spread that fast.
And we call them bird brains. Like,
Yeah.
seriously?
Well, that's funny. Well, I wasn't going to do both of the Saiku I had today, but maybe I'll do both of them because that relates to the other one, which actually has bird brain in there. You'll see at the end of the show. Maybe I'll do both this time.
Oh, brilliant! I'm waiting for it.
So let's hear this. Been there, done that. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. Been there, done that. What's next? The aerial trapeze artist has now acquired a new skill. For apparently a golden yellow crown just did not suffice. Singing for my supper was a long-learned skill that now seems worthless because of this new drill. I can dance and get my own food now. I don't need you to feed me any chow. I do a downward dog and grasp the lid. With my beak, of course. Duh, how else? And then it's time. Play some music from about to show you some tricks. I do the electric slide all along the rim, and then a hop, skip, and jump stick back. Et voila, the lid opens, and there are treats inside. Now that that's done, I'm bored, and looking for the next thing I wish to win. Perhaps it's time your car was floored, so claw to the pedal, I'll take it out for a spin.
Excellent. Thanks so much for another great story to highlight with a poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Nivedita.
Thank you, Tim. It's lovely talking to you as always. And great show today.
Yeah. Hope you have a great trip wherever you're going.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Once again, that was Nivedita Karthik with two poems, a Poet Respond poem. You can find the news story if you want to watch the video at news.sky.com. Sydney cockatoos work out how to open bin lids by watching others do the trick researchers say, with the video there. So thanks as always for that, Nivedita. Oops, let me put the numbers on screen. So once again, if you'd like to call in, the number is 818-850-7727 or Skype me at Rattle Poetry, but not both because then you will, I call you twice and that gets confusing too. And also I should say that turn off your stream where you're watching this, or at least mute it when I call you so that you're only talking to me through the phone, and have the poem ready to read yourself because there's a 30-second or so, up to 30-second delay. And so you can't read the poem off the screen, and you can't talk to me like at the same time. It's not that in sync, so it gets confusing otherwise. Let's call up. We have first time caller, I believe, is Gigi Capone. We'll do that. We'll have Zachary Honeycutt. Let's call up a Mike Bales right now. Let's see what Mike Bales has for us. I'll find Mike's poem.
Tough.
No problem. How you doing, Mike?
Pretty good. I haven't heard from you a while. I've been watching the podcast a lot of weeks. Some nights I miss because I've been doing karaoke.
Oh, that sounds fun. Like at a bar type thing? Where do you do karaoke?
It's a bar.
Yeah.
There are bars around here all over the place that do it.
Very cool. So what did you want to share with us tonight?
Well, I listen to Iowa Public Radio a lot, so the idea is stream there, but I officially to document something. I caught a little podcast from WI TV in Ames. It's about the smoke reaching the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has to do with themes I read about anyway, and it's called ghosting.
Yeah, let me put it up. It's gonna work. Just 1 second. I have to switch to this one. Okay. So I have it here. Ghosting. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, ghosting. Smoke from fires out west, cloud skies outside my window, a hazy doom. I hear a whisper and open the front door. Nobody's there. A neighbor's lawnmower drones early morning hours on the side street where I live. Someone who can barely breathe stays inside, yet I know life must go on. A bartender I know works alone, cleaning at a counter. I sit alone, feeling a passion burn, dreams of wanderlust, ribbons of highways, and wonders of forests as they crowd the skies. It's the same story, but different names and places, of fauna and forest, People in silence tend their spreads of land. The landscape whispers as they live and die. A blanket of haze from distant fires of new and old growth ghosts the face of the sun.
Oh, excellent. I love the ending. Mike Bales, thanks so much for sharing that.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you on. It's been a while. Thanks, Mike.
All right, bye.
Bye. There's Mike Bales with Ghosting. And next we'll call up... okay, so let's call up a first-time caller. This is Jill Capone. We'll see if we can connect with Jill. I'll mute this really quick and do this. Okay. We'll connect with Jill if we can get her on the phone. Oops, not Jill. Gigi Capone, sorry. Misread it out of the corner of my eye. And let's see. Gigi did not answer. So we'll try it again. Let's see. Call was declined. Let me try again. See if we can get a connection. No, so it says Gigi doesn't know. We'll try to circle back. Just text me or we'll see. Something's happening you're not answering. Let's try this 646 number and see who that is. Hey, you're live on the air. Who am I talking to?
This is Emma Goldman Sherman. I'm in New York.
Thanks so much for calling in. What do you have that you'd like to share with us tonight?
Witness Daniel Hale.
And was this a Poets Respond poem?
It was Poets Respond for this week because he was sentenced this week. And so I sent this in.
Great. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, I'm trying to remember what the details are for Daniel Hale. What was he sentenced for?
He was sentenced for blowing the whistle basically on the drone program as not being, what they said it was, not accurate, not clean, killing lots of civilians. And, he was sentenced.
And how long was he sentenced for? Do you remember?
He got almost 4 years. I think it's 45 months. And Biden was asking for 11 years, and his lawyers were asking for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to say about that. It's just awful.
Yeah. But reading all about it, like all over again, reading his letters specifically really inspired me because I was thinking about the first time he said that he saw what the drones were doing. He was watching these men on a mountain and they were drinking. Mm-hmm. And he said they were sort of just like the men he would have grown up with drinking. And I thought about, that connection that he made as he basically blew them to pieces. Anyway, it just struck me. So I wrote the poem.
Yeah. Well, let's hear it. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Sure. Thanks. Witness Daniel Hale, once a virgin American, hardening as he watched the tea-drinking men around the campfire on the mountain, all with weapons he would have had if he'd been there with them drinking, thinking this looks just like growing up in Bristol, Tennessee, where his friends and their fathers drank beers around the campfires they built on Holston Mountain in the Blue Ridge, not far from Damascus, not far from the waterfall at Blue Hole, these roads where he learned to drive with his blue eyes, learned landmarks named for common settlers and hunters, regular folk, like these men in the Afghani night, as souled and worthy of remembrance as Clinch. Daniel recognized their camaraderie, remembered his comrades, as the purple-colored crystal guts woke him up to the fact that they were strangers but his own, that his Blue Ridge brothers would have shattered and splattered all the same, that he was witness to the lies, that this protects us at home, that we're fighting something bigger than ourselves, that drones are accurate and clean, when he knows it's contracts and greed and grist for the mill of empire. Witness again, as if for the first time here, although years have passed, how we ignore all the death we're responsible for, pretend we're not bloody, white, or blue, not flags, but then who?
Yeah, excellent poem. Thanks for sharing that. An important poem to share, too. I mean, I don't know, I don't really watch much news, so I'm not 100% sure I get my news from, Facebook posts from friends and from Twitter trending and from Poets Respond submissions. And I haven't heard anything about this except for your submission, which I don't know how much it's being like swept under the rug, but it seems like such an important topic to be talking about and one that we're not really addressing.
Well, thank you for letting me share it. I felt like it was really important, and so I really, really appreciate being able to put it out here. Thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye. Yeah, so that was Emma Goldman Sherman from New York reading Witness, Daniel Hale. Let's see. Let me try again with Gigi. Hopefully Gigi Capone will answer this time. I think she was going to read Ted's poem. Let's see if it works.
Hello.
Hello, you are live. If you wanted to come in on video, you can click the camera button, but you don't have to if you don't want to.
Hello.
Hello. Let me get you. You got a great connection. Let me resize it. Okay, there we go. So you're calling in and you wanted to read Ted Guevara's poem for him.
Correct. That's my brother.
Great. And do you can you tell us a little bit about Ted? What's it like being Ted's brother or sister?
Well, it's fun to have a creative one in the family. I'm certainly not that person, so I enjoy reading his poetry and his books and his different ideas.
Mm-hmm. So, did you want to read his nonce poem, Across and Down? Was that the one?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me. And do you want to explain? Do you want me to read this, or do you want to explain what the style is? Did he tell you that?
He did. He wrote this all out for me,
okay.
So I can read this.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So this is from Ted. When I was in 9th or 10th grade, my grades were not that great, and I had a father who always sought something positive in me. Since my grades were not at his par most of the time, I would write a poem with the first letter of each line being my grade. Then I would present the poem to him before giving the actual report card.
Oh, that's cool.
I couldn't find one of these poems now after so many years. But back then, I started many lines with can't or devour and the occasional forceps. It's a simple technique. Decades later, I expanded on the idea by using the beginning word of each line to form a message if I read downward. Here's a sample. Across and down. Frame your memory so I could see it tomorrow. Your place in mine has gone off with the tide. Memory is not quite the warmth that was once on me. So gather the particles and weigh in. It's not too dispersed. I will look up and fly the gossamer of you yesterday. Could you withstand the mind without see it against the sea? It will elevate with the sun. I'll just diminish tomorrow.
Excellent. And then, so what is the secret hidden message?
Okay. So if you read the first word of each of those lines, it reads, frame your memory so I could see it.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. And
yeah,
a great. It's sort of a golden shovel is a form that came out, I don't know, pretty recently from Terrence Hayes, which is sort of the opposite of that. It's interesting that Ted thought of it first. That's very cool.
Yeah,
or a different version of it.
And I never knew.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing that.
This is like the first time I've heard of it.
Yeah. Well, that is great. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, and thanks to Ted for writing and having to call in.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes, that was Ted Guevara's sister reading his poem for him, Across and Down. And now let's try. Let me read a poem for... Let's go to, where did they? Oh, here's Carlton Johnson. He has two poems. So let's do Carlton Johnson's Poets Respond poem. And the the news reference. Let me open this up. So this is Carlton Johnson's Poet Respond poem this week. NASA detects water vapor on Jupiter's Ganymede, the largest moon in the solar system. Let me get rid of this box. Oh, this is all weird. Okay. And so we have video here. Let's see. Jupiter now has 79 official moons. NASA detected water vapor for the very first time in the atmosphere of Ganymede, not only Jupiter's largest moon, but the largest moon in our entire solar system. Researchers made the discovery using both new and archival data from NASA's Hubble Space Telescope, which is back in action after a computer anomaly suddenly shut it down, the 32-year-old system, for a month. They published their findings this week in the journal Nature Astronomy. This is an article from CBSNews.com. According to NASA, the water vapor on Ganymede forms when ice from the moon's surface transitions from solid to gas, skipping the liquid state, also known as sublimation. And so that is the article that this poem is about. And here is Carlton Johnson's poem. And here we go. So there's an epigraph from Homer's Iliad, book 20. Ganymede was the loveliest born of the race of mortals, and therefore the gods caught him away to themselves, to be Zeus's wine-pourer, for the sake of his beauty, so he might be among the immortals. Oh, that's interesting. So I didn't know the mythology around Ganymede. And here's the poem. Greeks knew him well, that young and beautiful lad who once sung natural shepherd's tunes while tending young and fearless sheep, while lending might and prowess to great Zeus's favor. Eagled and swept in for the taking, drink up, young Ganymede, for now it's water, enlivened in vapor, but not wine to savor. Really cool little poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Carlton. And he had a nonce form poem, too. I will read that while we're at it. The nonce form, here's the nonce form poem rules that Carlton came up with. A 5-line poem. The first 2 lines have any number of syllables. The third line is the sum of the first 2. Interesting. The fourth is the sum of the second and third line. And the fifth is the sum of lines 3 and 4. So we get this like almost I don't know, interesting. It's a 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 example. So almost a I don't know what would you call that? That kind of numbers game going on, like the Fibonacci sequence or something. And here is Carlton's very short poem in its nonce form. And notice how it goes from 1 syllable to 2 to 3 to 5 to 8. Okay, you only are the one I need for my breath. Join me forever in wide, big air. That was really cool. I'll read it again. It's almost like a sonnet. You only are the one I need for my breath. Join me forever in wide, big air. So this is the nonce poem by Carlton Johnson. Thanks so much for sharing that, Carlton. Always a pleasure to share your work. And now let's go to let's call up Karen Warinsky. Let's see what Karen has. A single stitch. Hey, Karen, you are live on the air. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. It's getting a little late for me, but here I am.
Great. Well, I'm glad we could get you in time. Do you want to come in on video or just stay in audio?
Let me give it a shot. I think I just turned it on.
There we go.
Yeah. Here I am. It's me.
Yeah, great to see you. So what do you have to share with us today?
Well, I did a poet's response piece, and I knew it wasn't going to be probably what you picked for the week as most important news, but it really touched me, the story. So I just wanted to, write about it, and I sent it to you.
Yeah, that's great. So let us know what the story is. What was it about?
So basically, I sometimes read this thing called the Good News Network because
I love that, actually. Yeah, I really do.
Sometimes you need something on the positive side. And
yeah, if you check, I follow it both on my personal Facebook and on Twitter just to have some good news because, usually the social media feeds are not. And I accidentally see a lot of social media just because I use it for Rattle a lot. And And so you got to have some good stuff to balance out.
Try to balance it out. And I'll tell you, we've been going through a couple of years here where it's been pretty intense for everybody. This, revelation each day, the pandemic, the economy, et cetera, et cetera. So I was, obviously that's on everybody's mind. And then this little story was so amazing because it was just about saving one creature. And I thought that really sort of sums up what we all need to be doing. You can only do what's right in front of you sometimes. And so I wrote about it, and I'll love to read it for you now if you're ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, it's called A Single Stitch. Fish tangle in nets, bugs catch in sticky spider webs, people enmesh in their own intrigues. Much of life is murk and mess, and our attempts to restore can flounder. But it only took one stitch to fix the tree frog, his innards poking through a minuscule hole, the vet deciding she might be able to save the little creature, brought inside accidentally, clinging to a sheaf of grass. Needle and thread cannot repair the rip in our environment, nor our political breach, but affirmation and friendship help us bear the unbearable, make peace with the incomprehensible, face the future. The vet saved the tree frog, pushed his tiny organs back beneath his skin, sutured with a single stitch, showing us the covenant can be kept. We must try in these days of tears, tears, and fears, while waters rise, fires burn, and Babylon crumbles, to help each other through. Get your needle handy. Get ready to make a stitch.
Oh, that's really wonderful. Great story. I'm really glad you highlighted that. It reminds me of, I'm in this high desert group too, high desert wildlife, because, we live near the high desert. And there's just so many people that do, like they find, some kind of bird or road runner that seems like heat stroke or whatever, and they're trying to nurse it back to health and asking for advice, and people know where to take it. And, and like saving rattlesnakes. It's just, there is good in the world. And it's great to hear a story like that. Thanks for sharing that, Karen.
Oh, my pleasure. Bye, Tim.
Yeah, bye. Have a good one. Now, once again, that was Karen Warinsky with A Single Stitch, a Poets Respond poem. Who should we have next? Let's call up Carla Schwartz. We usually do Carla at the very end, and let's not do at the very end. Sorry, Carla. I don't know how it just works out that way. But let's do Carla Schwartz.
Hi, just let me shut you.
No problem, Carla.
Shut you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how are you doing tonight?
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I'm doing very well. What an interesting night so far. The interview was great. And I've gotten over my fall, by the way, from last weekend.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah, I'm good. And I wasn't sure I was going to come up with the nonce, but then I was swimming, and this came to me while I was swimming.
Oh, very cool.
And it's also a mathematical nonce.
Interesting.
And I'm calling it a pithy, except for that I that you would think would be pithy, like the word pithy is a Y.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
After Pythagorean and Pythagoras. And so my nonce form is called a pithy, and it's a poem in tercets where the syllable count for each line of a given tercet is one of three integers that form a Pythagorean triple.
Oh, interesting.
So, and then if you have more than one tercet in your poem, you should try to use more than one triple.
Oh, interesting. Okay? Yeah, that's an interesting form.
So your haiku, a couple of them would fall under this category.
Great.
And so the ones that I use are 3, 4, 5, 5, 12, 13, and 6, 8, 10.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, let's hear them.
Obeisance, the patriarch's last command. It's his choice. It's what he wants. No commands that you drive all the way down to rural Virginia, to your father's hilltop castle, to stand vigil while he stops all food and drink. He's dragged your sister in too, the two of you together in sufferance to witness him wither.
Oh, great ending. A powerful poem there. And interesting that so many poets are coming up with syllabic forms. Is the kind that you hardly even notice as you're reading them. But they make this sort of magic happen where you have to sort of think of things you wouldn't thought of otherwise to make them work.
Yeah, I definitely did, and I don't know, I thought it was really cool. I hope there's going to be a lot more pithies out here in the world after this night.
Yeah, I hope so too. We have a lot of examples for everyone to do in the future. Thanks for calling and sharing this, Carla.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye, Tim.
Bye. Okay, and let's go to the first-time caller next, and this is Melody Wang. Hopefully, Melody will be here. Hey, Melody, you are live on the air.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Do you want to come in on video? You have to click the camera button if you do, but if not, that's okay.
Okay, let me try this.
There you go. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Happy to be here with everyone.
Yeah, happy to have you. So where are you calling from first? I like to ask first-time callers.
I'm calling from Monrovia, California.
Like right down the hill from me. We actually get our furniture from a store there. In Monrovia,
okay.
The living spaces. We got a bunch of stuff there.
With the big parking lot.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's nice to see a poet local.
Thank you, Tim.
So what do you want to share with us today?
I wanted to share my poem that I submitted for the Poets Respond. It's called As If in a Waterlogged Dream, and it was about the floods in Henan, and that is my hometown. My mom's family, well, my aunts and my uncle and all of my cousins, they're all still there.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that poem.
Yeah. Are they all safe? Is everything kind of subsiding and getting back to normal? I saw some video and it was really rough there.
Yeah, it's been devastating, but my family has been okay, thank God. But it's really devastating. I think the last numbers were 99 people were dead, and of course, like 9 million were affected, and so many were displaced. So
yeah, that's one of the things though that we it's awful when it happens and all the destruction. But if you look back in history, I mean, some of the floods have like 800,000, 1 million deaths, and to have, 99 is terrible, but it's come a long way in management and in communication to keep people out of harm's way and things like that, at least,
Yeah, definitely. I think I read somewhere it was caused by, like the extreme global warming or weather events. So yeah, it's like nothing that could have prepared anyone for that.
Yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead and read this? This is As If in a Waterlogged Dream. Great title, by the way. Yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Tim. As if in a waterlogged dream, I see Henan, my hometown, drowning in a demonic downpour. For the first time in years, I'm there with my people, the ones displaced by the discordant nature of the heavy floods, frenzied and furious torrents slamming Zhengzhou with 1/3 of its annual average rainfall in 1 hour, or a whole year's worth of water in just 3 unholy days. I slogged through currents, past the frantic families still clinging to each other, and another chance to live again. I'm there in the submerged, run-down neighborhoods, weather-worn palms outstretched to my elderly neighbors, their eyes wide with palpable panic, voices warped and shredded from sobbing, screaming as if that could force the floodwaters to relent, as if that would bring their only sons and daughters back to them. I'm there in the now empty yellow subway platform with the father who could be my father, who would whistle as he biked his daughter to the platform each day. The cardboard sign he holds now in his rough, trembling hands echoes his plea that will go unanswered. My dear daughter, I would give anything just to bike you there each morning again. We do not need another baptism to cleanse us. We will forever seek what remains of the home we once knew.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That cardboard sign is such a poignant part of the poem. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Tim. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. And hope you can call in again sometime soon.
Thank you for the space.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, so once again, that was Melody Wang with this poem here, As If in a Waterlogged Dream. Okay, let us go to Zachary Honeycutt next. Zach's been on before, but it's been a long time, I believe. Let's see, when was he on last? June 27th, so a month ago. But once a month, Zachary seems to call in. Oh, yeah, okay. This is what he's sending. Let's talk to Zach. Hey, Zachary, you are live on the air. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Hey, Tim. How's it going?
It's going great. It's a good night. Good to be back at work. You know, I have one of those jobs where I go on vacation, and then I'm glad to be back because it's fun to do a lot of the stuff I get to do. So what did you want to share with us? It says it was inspired by the Ekphrastic Challenge, and that reminds me that I meant to include. I'm going to start including more of the Ekphrastic Challenge stuff on the Rattlecast. I don't know. We do Poets Respond, but I should have the Ekphrastic Challenge poets on too and stuff like that. So I'll make a point to do that in the future. But what was this about?
So I got 2 villanelles today. So this is the Ekphrastic Challenge. I'm just going to read what I wrote when I sent it to you because it sums it up the best. For a long time now, I've had it in the back of my mind to write some poems on the Tower of Babel, or at least the concept of the tower and how pride comes before a fall and such. When I viewed the picture for the Ekphrastic Challenge, it gave me an excuse to do just that. Almost immediately, the angelic-looking figure flying around over the water in the picture reminded me of Icarus and the devil. Upon further research while writing the poem, I found that not only did Icarus fly too close to the sun and fall, but he drowned in the sea. From that, I began to write a villanelle about how some in mankind are like Icarus or the devil, following after lofty dreams and worldly pursuits instead of the Spirit of God and what God places true value on, such as kindness and obedience to Him. I'm a Christian, and it's been a while since I wrote a good biblically themed poem. I've wanted to write one for a while now, so I thought the structure of a villanelle, the way the lines wrap around each other over and over and over again, would hold merit with the way the poem is trying to establish the fact that what humans did during the day of Babel and their spirit of pride and haughtiness is still prevalent and being redone today. So that's kind of what the poem is about.
Excellent. And let me just tell everybody who's watching that this is the image. If you didn't, the deadline was yesterday to submit poems for the Ekphrastic Challenge. So if you didn't do it yet, you missed out. But this is the image. It's by Lynn Tate. And it's this photograph of a sunset with some kind of winged creature. I don't even know if it's a bird or a bat or Icarus flying over the water near what looks like maybe smokestacks. I'm not quite sure either. It's an interesting photo, and this was Zachary Honeycutt's response to it. Why don't you go ahead whenever you're ready, Zach? I'll put it up.
Yeah, definitely. It actually reminded me of the Mothman at first.
Yeah. It's kind of got that shape, doesn't it? I'm not sure what kind of animal that is, actually. It'll be interesting to see. I haven't read any of the submissions yet, so we'll see.
Well, here you go. This is the first one.
Yeah.
So, the children of Icarus. If Icarus fell, do you think you'll fly? Bezos rides high on his origin blue, but they must build their towers to the sky. If Cush's son approved it, did he ask why? The tower built in Shinar isn't new. If Icarus fell, do you think you'll fly? Children still groaning with hunger must cry, millions per minute as rockets flew, but they must build their towers to the sky. 2 princes of air cast down from on high. Lucifer had wings made of feathers too. If Icarus fell, do you think you'll fly? Do birds long to fly elsewhere than the sky? Do mammals that hunt and birth not want to? But they must build their towers to the sky. Now a word to those with the sun nearby. He drowned in rough water, and you may too. If Icarus fell, do you think you'll fly? But they must build their towers to the sky.
Excellent use of the villanelle. Thanks for sharing that, Zachary. Did you say you had 2 poems?
Yes, I do. I have another villanelle.
Okay.
Just
Oh, it's
for
in the
the
same
heck of
file
it.
here. I see it. Yeah, respite for Zachary. And what is this?
Okay, so this one, I sent this actually in one of the contest submissions for the Rattle Prize in September. And
Oh wait, for
I
yeah.
wrote
So I'm gonna cut you off because we haven't judged this. It's supposed to be blind judged. I'm not gonna read it or let you show it on air since you submitted it for the Rattle Poetry Prize because it's supposed to be anonymously read, and so I don't want to disqualify it from consideration. So yeah, so I'm not gonna read it. But after September, if it's not one of the winners, call in and share it then. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Didn't realize. All right.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. Thanks, Zachary.
All right, yeah, no problem. Bye.
Okay, take care. I'm glad you said that though. All right, bye.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so that was Zachary Honeycutt with just one poem. He said it in the subject line. I just didn't notice. I should have. Okay. Let's see. Now Jane. Look at this. So Jane Ann Fuller sent me an email. So Roy Bentley mentioned that he loves this new book by Jane Ann Fuller. Jane, if you're there, do you want to call in and read this poem? I'm trying to see if there's anybody who might be you on our call list. And I don't see it actually. So Jane, if you're actually watching, because Jane just 42 minutes ago sent this poem. I'll read this poem and share it if I don't hear, if the phone doesn't ring in the next couple of minutes. But let's call up, in the meantime, Richard Westheimer. And we got some poems by Vicky Miko, too.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Richard, let me shrink you down. You got that great internet connection.
Yeah, I live out here in the country, and somehow they got us fiber optics. Who knew?
Yeah, same here. I mean, we're a tiny town. We have 1 gig, which is just amazing. I'm so grateful to the people who did that.
Yeah, it made the pandemic a little...
I'm sure. And we were in Bend, Oregon, which is a pretty small city, and they have 1 gig by a local company too. So maybe it's just the way of the future now. All these Comcasts and things we can get rid of and have more local companies provide good internet.
Yeah, speaking of Bend, I looked, after you said you were there, I looked at that Obsidian flow, and that is just stunning.
It's so cool. Let me actually pull up. I had a picture. Just so people can see it. It's really cool. I mean, when you see it from, like, this is the view. Let's see. I want one of the aerial views. I mean, you can see how it just spreads like this sort of. It reminded me. You know what it reminds me of is the elephant's foot at Chernobyl.
Mm-hmm.
But here is. Let's see. This is a picture of it. I'll show it on screen.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is the big obsidian flow. Yeah, Richard can't see it, but this is an aerial view. And you can hike up in here. There's this road here that's East Lake and Paulina and Lake, which are both caldera lakes. This is a huge Newberry crater caldera with a cinder cone in the middle of pumice. And then there's this road, and you just hike up, and you hike in this little mile loop up in the black obsidian glass, which this is the Wikipedia page, but I have some more. Oh, these are like technical images.
Yeah, that's the one I saw on Wikipedia. The one that you're showing over there on my other screen.
Yeah, here's another. Some more. This is a different cone in the same Newberry crater caldera area. Anyway, yeah, so that is very cool stuff. I just love, like, everywhere we go there. We've been there 3 times because we were visiting relatives, and every time there's new cool places to explore. There's all these waterfalls, and I like hiking, but there's no water around me, and there's no recent volcanism. It was millions and millions of years ago where we had volcanism here. And
great. It has been wonderful catching on all these Appalachian poets, and they're all folks who show up to some of the readings that I go to. So this is the 3rd one in a month.
Oh, very cool.
I was on a reading with Roy probably 2 months ago, but it's great to get the full, rather than a feature poet who just reads for 20 minutes to get the full interview and conversation.
I like talking to people. It's a lot of fun. I get a lot out of it personally. So hopefully, I mean, the point is, or the hope is that if I get something out of it, everybody else does too.
Well, and 2 things that came through today, both with your talking about your writing haiku on the airplane and Roy's conversation is how much joy there is in writing.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of, there's a lot of all the other things that go with it, but it's just this sense of joyfulness, which I have to remember.
Yeah, yeah. And I was thinking actually as I was writing on the plane, what Ace Bodges said about like I don't take pictures, I just write poems. And so I was just thinking of like images for the week that I and then each one became a little haiku. And I wrote like 20 of them, and and it was just fun, and it's great that poetry can do that.
Well, it reminded me of, I had a running coach for a little while, and I sent him a picture of me with my running form. And I was really excited for him to send me back some nice thing about my form. And he said, "You need to smile more, brother." That was his whole, and it changed my life. It changed how, my approach to running.
Yeah, very interesting. So which poem did you want to share? I think did you send 2 this week?
I did. It's getting a little obsessive.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah. So I'll do A Poet Gets the Twisties.
Okay. And what was this about?
So this was, it's pretty straightforward. Simone Biles talked about the twisties, and I read, what that is, and it's, it's this disorientation when you're in the air, and you can just imagine the existential danger that puts a gymnast in. And,
like pilots who get the vertigo and forget which way up is, that whatever that syndrome is that happens sometimes.
Yeah, the ground is really hard.
Yeah, it really, especially when you're doing double pikes
or whatever. So I just, it immediately felt like a metaphor. So a poet gets the twisties. Okay. I just her as an epigraph. I just don't trust myself as much as I used to. I'm having a bit of the twisties.
Yeah, it's a great phrase too. Somehow except for your poem, I hadn't seen that either.
Yeah. I am like a gymnast turned upside down, who remembers she is a body, tumbles like a juggling pin flung by a mad clown, suddenly thinks about which part of her would break as she hurtles towards ground she cannot see. She is as lost as a poet, dropped blind in a tilt-a-whirl of words swarmed with buzzes and bees and shouts and dying rhymes. I write on that same wild ride, fear the poem and its twisted nouns, its turns of phrase, its gravity, which flings me to the unforgiving page, shatters what bones remain that I'd use to land where I cannot see, discover what don't want to know.
Yeah, excellent poem. A good metaphor for poetry too. Do you know if she's going to compete still, or is she just out of the Olympics completely? I haven't seen any news today.
I think there's one more event that she might compete in, but
well, I heard. I think she, because there's the individual, like she withdrew from the team and the all around, but there's like individuals in each one that she could still do. Last I heard.
Yeah,
like
she's dropped out of 3 of them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's one more pending. I just imagine when you get this in your mind that you might be up in the air and start thinking about thinking.
It's hard to imagine. Like once you withdraw from one, it's hard to imagine like redoing it ever. I mean,
and like she's old for a gymnast, so it's and had to wait an extra year for this Olympics. So
it's too bad.
I admire the sense of knowing what's best for yourself.
Yeah. It's amazing, an amazing person. Thanks for sharing this, Richard. Do you want to do the other one too?
Sure. Okay. That one was a little experimental. And I'll just briefly introduce it, is that there's another outbreak of Candidus auris, which is a new, about a 10-year-old fungus that is not responsive to antifungals, and it's breaking out in nursing homes. And its unique characteristic, one of them is that it seems to break out occasionally simultaneously in different cities.
That's very strange.
It's like this non-local.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's all that stuff about like the, different scientific discoveries were made by different people continents away at the same time, and then the one who publishes it first,
Right.
There's that weird thing that happens. Maybe they're tapped into some kind of fungal network.
Quantum non-locality.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting.
That could be it. So anyway, so this is the litany of near silent sounds of grief and hope. I think I will do nothing for a long time but listen and accrue what I hear into myself, Walt Whitman. If I could listen like Whitman, what might I hear of these? An untreatable fungus stalks a nursing home, finds hosts in old folks. A solitary honeybee sips nectar from clover growing in the unmown yard. Survey flag tape hangs shushed on stakes by old-growth beech. The maple's xylem seeps sweet into buckets hung in the February sun. The last leaf of the last ash tree gives in to abscission. A monarch on her annual migration burns the last of her fat, falls like a feather from the sky. Smoke whispers from the wick of an extinguished candle. My granddaughter breathes dreams nestled in her bubby's arms. Nutsedge churs its way through a crack in the pavement. Red wigglers churn loamy soil beneath my feet. The key slips in a bulldozer's ignition switch. An antifungal drug weeps through an IV needle. A fungus succumbs to that drug. A fungus does not succumb to that drug. The last shudder of a dying man. A sigh settles after the barred owl hoots.
Very interesting poem there, Richard. All the different little vignettes tying together, almost ghazal-like. Thanks for sharing that. A litany of near silent sounds of grief and hope. Very cool poem.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Yep,
Appreciate the evening. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, have a good night.
Thanks.
I think that was Richard Westheimer. I think Julian Matthews might be the only poet we have left. Let me double check. Oh, Vicky Miko did send some stuff in. Maybe I'll read. Vicky hasn't called, but she did send some stuff. Maybe I'll read a poem by Vicky if she doesn't call. But let's call up Julian Matthews now and see what Julian has. Oh, this is interesting. Hey, Julian, are you there?
Hi.
Hello, good to see you, Julian. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
So you have a response to one of the poems we heard on the open mic just a little bit ago. You said that Zachary's poem reminded you of this one.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about it?
So I wrote this some time ago, but I tried to be positive during the pandemic and come up with something less depressing than some of the stuff I write.
Yeah.
So this was called Daedalus Quill. So he spoke about Icarus. The Daedalus was the one who actually invented the wings that got them off the island together.
Ah, that's what it is.
Icarus
I was trying to remember, yeah.
Icarus was the one who crashed and drowned. So this poem is called Daedalus Quill. Shall I read it?
Yeah, go ahead. Whenever you're ready, I have it up for you. Or for everyone at home, anyway. Go ahead.
Daedalus Quill. The fast cars you invented sit in unmanned factories fossilizing, just like the fuels they fed them. The great ships you built are adrift in the ocean, silent arcs with no flood coming. Your jets lie in formation on cold tarmac, pilotless, planed, and grounded. Perhaps it is never too late to learn the lesson of Icarus. We are all mere passengers that flew too close to the sun, not respecting its mighty benevolence. Yet the rivers still flow, the trees still reach out and grow, the sea still will waves to the shore, the mountains still stand tall over valleys below. And yet you wonder, as this ghost ship of a million souls leaves this broken harbor, as the birds take wing outside your window, as the weeds grow under your feet, why you are still alive. Even Daedalus kept on inventing and reinventing after his son's burial. The wax still warm on his weathered hand, filled up a lone feather with his inky tears, and turned it into a quilt.
Oh, really well-written poem. Poignant. Thanks so much for sharing that. Daedalus's Quill. Julian, thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah. Bye. There's Julian Matthews with Daedalus's Quill. Okay, and now let's see. So we I don't see any calls from Jane Ann Fuller, but she did send this poem. This is from her book Half-Life that Roy Bentley mentioned earlier today. So Julia, or Jane Ann Fuller, I should say, was listening and sent this in as a sample. So thanks for this. I'm really interested in hearing this poem. Let me put it up here. This is Everything Depends Upon, and this is from that book Half-Life. Once again, let's get this down. Okay, everything depends upon sex and how well we position ourselves, the elbow developing a wing, the reciprocating knee, the bird at the window proving all ledges are not for jumping, sometimes perching, watching with great admiration how a foot can be apart when it is nothing more than bone, and sometimes broken. What I love about you is your body, how it moves around your soul, a hand inside a glove, and when I see it bare like this and wanting, I think how honey wants the bee to come. Oh, that's a beautiful poem too. Lovely short poem. Once again by Jane Ann Fuller from her book Half-Life. Let me I'll put this, see if I can put this on screen too. So you can see it's from Sheila Nagig Books. And let me find a good cover image here. Okay, well here is the book. This is Half-Life, poems by Jane Ann Fuller. So check that out. That was the book that Roy Bentley was recommending earlier on the show. Okay, so now let's really quickly, we will do the Saiku for today. And I was only going to share one. I happened to write two because I was on vacation, so I read a lot. I mean, I read a lot. It was nice reading articles and things instead of poetry for a little bit. And I had two here. Let's see. So the first one was this story, and let me put it on screen. Drop that down. Okay, so this is a story from Yale News. Eyes Wide Shut, How Newborn Mammals Dream the World They're Entering. And basically what these researchers did at Yale was look at the retinal waves in the brains of mice in the womb before they were born. And they found that they have the same wave patterns as they would while visualizing things after they were born. So what they're doing is sort of previewing, and there's a really great video of the actual waves in these neonatal mice, which you can find on this article at Yale, or news.yale.edu, if you type it into Google or whatever. And but it's the first evidence that that mammals dream in the womb. We kind of assume that they do or think that they do, but it's a really hard thing to find. And now we have this proof here. And it seems like what they're doing is looking trying to set up the brain to be ready to receive signals and interpret them so that as soon as they open their eyes, they can respond to danger and don't have to sort of program the world. And for the same reason that babies know how to latch and recognize their mother and startle for sudden movements and things like that, it seems like the babies dream before they're born as well. And this was my short haiku for that. Well, I guess haiku are always the same length. Let me drop this down too. Okay. Morning fog, an infant dreams in the womb. Morning fog, an infant dreams in the womb. So that was my one haiku that I was going to share. And then this other one too, since the coincidence that Nivedita mentioned bird brains. And this was the other article I wrote a haiku about. Bird brains left other dinosaurs behind. And this is an article from UT Austin, University of Texas, Austin. And they found this very rare fossilized three-dimensional skull of a pre-comet, pre-mass extinction early bird, a dinosaur that was sort of halfway into evolving toward birds, basically. And what they did is compare it to modern birds now. And they had such a great skull here that they could map the way the brain fit in the different regions of the brain compared to modern birds. And what they found is that these birds that went extinct, had smaller cerebral cortexes than the birds that we have now. And so it seems like the disaster, the comet that caused the KT extinction event, put so much environmental change pressure that birds with bigger brains were selected for and survived, and the birds with smaller brains, like this poor, what was it called? An ichthyornis. This poor ichthyornis wasn't smart enough to survive, and so didn't. And that's why the birds these days are so smart. The crows are really smart. We have stellar jays here, and they're just genius. They do all these things that you really impressed by. And of course, crows can recognize faces. They can recognize themselves. Another study showed that they understand the concept of zero, which we didn't understand until, half of the modern human history. We didn't understand what zero was, but crows do. So, very interesting story there. And so birds are smarter than we think they are, is the basic gist. And there's a reason for that. It's because that's the way they evolved and survived through these massive ecological destructions that have happened throughout history. And so here's my other haiku. Here we go. You try building a house from twigs and hay, bird brain. You try building a house from twigs and hay, bird brain. That is my second haiku for today. And now let us tell you what the show next week is going to be. Next week's prompt is going to be at the library, a very simple one, at the library. And we'll see what you can come up with that. Just situate yourself in a place and see what happens. And next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Maria Mazziati-Gillen and her new book, When the Stars Were Still Visible. Maria is sort of the patron saint of Rattle, I think. She is just such a wonderful person and sort of the embodiment of what we think poetry is and kind of should be or could be. She just tells her story with such honesty and such heart, and all of her books are wonderful. And she's just an amazing person leading the Poetry Center at PCCC and running the creative writing program at UC Binghamton. I mean, not UC Binghamton, SUNY Binghamton, I should say. And so she's got one of the places that we publish a lot of poets from is that SUNY Binghamton program. And so Maria's been the teacher and mentor to many of them. And like Dante DiFestano and Abby E. Murray and a whole bunch of other people that we publish all the time. We're students of Maria, and she's just a wonderful poet in person. I'm really looking forward to it. We interviewed her in issue number 46, and we'll be talking to her again and sharing new poems on Rattlecast number 105. It's Sunday, August 8th at the early time. We're going to be switching times just for this episode and for one coming up too in a few weeks. And what that does is it's a better time for Maria, and it's also allows some people in Europe and stuff to join in. So occasionally we're going to be dropping shows back to this noon Eastern time slot. And this is going to be a week we're going to do that. Even though this is the regular time, is 8 p.m. Eastern at night. This is going to be a noon show. And that's Rattlecast number 105 with Maria Mazziotti-Gillen and your poems at the library. Thanks so much for joining us, as always. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you for the Critique of the Week, too, on Friday, because we're back. Take care.